Hi, Pastor Larson here with Covenant Presbyterian Church, and I just wanted to address the questions about when we here at Covenant are looking to potentially reopen for in-person gatherings for worship. As I've gotten a lot of questions about that lately, and that's certainly understandable. So when do I and leadership foresee that potentially happening? Well, let me start first with a little bit of background. Well, you and I and pretty much the whole planet is aware of the extraordinary circumstances that we've had in the last few weeks with COVID. It's been difficult on everybody. Certainly tensions in family relationships, unprecedented anxiety, partly fueled by the constant barrage of media coverage, and of course strains on budgets, whether it be for businesses or for families. As a society, we're faced with the likelihood of possibly having to dig ourselves out of this huge economic calamity, unemployment and layoffs for quite a while. But it's easy to forget, I think, that the government is also faced with something that they didn't see coming, something they had not planned for. And they've really struggled with how exactly to best respond to the situation and the crisis. And you know what? There's been shining moments for the government, as well as a lot of missteps, I think, for them as well along the way. And we, like so many other churches, have followed suit with what so much of society has had to accommodate over the past few months. We've had to sacrifice for a time something which we hold very dear to us. We've had to sacrifice meeting together in person to worship and to be able to connect and commune with one another. Fortunately, in the age of internet, we have the blessing of the ability to still join with one another digitally for worship, and that gives us something in some way, shape, or form to gather for worship and Bible study, even though, of course, it's not what we prefer in the long term. So where are we at this point? Well, the way things are trending right now, society-wise, the way I really see it is that it looks like within a few weeks we will probably be allowed to freely gather in person once again, although that's likely to have a few recommendations and constraints placed upon it, such as social distancing, maybe even size limitations, etc. And of course, we're going to be able to handle that, and we'll figure that out. But we fully expect it to be coming soon. In fact, Governor Newsom yesterday said that the government will allow churches and other places of worship. They expect that to happen, to reopen within weeks, in his words. And I know that many of you are super eager to gather again. And although I know that many will still opt to stay home for the time being, which is totally understandable, there are so many people that want to gather together at this point in time. And I know that, just as a kind of an aside, that many have brought up the question of whether the government even has the right to tell churches whether they can or cannot meet. And certainly that's a difficult question to answer, and there's a lot of variables go into that. Personally, I think based on everything, I think that they do have that right for a period of time. And the reason why I say that is they have the right to tell us how many people that we can gather safely with in our sanctuary and other places based on fire codes and so forth. They have a lot of rights for public safety to do a lot of things. And I think they do have the right for safety situations, just as if a hurricane was coming, just with this unprecedented thing with COVID. I think they do have the right to tell churches what they may do, so long as that is on par with so many of the other businesses and so forth around. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But Romans 13 does say that we are supposed to submit to governing authorities, certainly within that reasonableness of not being singled out as religious bodies or going against the Word of God. And I think, you know what, one of the things that's difficult is that if society is holding back and feeling like, well, the government is saying that we shouldn't get together, then it can hurt our witness if we as a church meet during the midst of that. Certainly there are times and places, certainly when the church is singled out for different reasons, I think that can be appropriate. However, I think in this case it would really hurt our witness. And I think that it's been totally appropriate for us to do what we've done. In fact, some of those churches which have opted to continue to meet, and there are some, you may have heard of some, I think in a lot of ways they've actually potentially hurt the witness of the church, which is something that's they're not intending to do probably, but it's really sad. The reason why is because there's so many people out there who are really just chomping at the bit for something to point at, to try and say to the church, see, I told you they were a bunch of ignoramuses. They're a bunch of people who are just, in the dark. They have no clue of what's going on. And that, in those cases, it really gives them something to point at. And especially as society right now is saying, well, I'm holding back for my business and my employment based on what the government is recommending. How come they're not? And I think that especially because we're not being singled out, we're being treated the same. However, on the flip side of that, I think I totally agree that as things start to open up, that the churches with a similar conscientious conduct as the rest of society must be allowed to gather as provided under the First Amendment. And you know what? I fully expect that that is exactly what will happen in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. We're super excited. We're keeping our fingers on the pulse of what's going on. And hopefully in just a few weeks' time, we'll be able to reconnect in person with our friends and our loved ones. So until that time, blessings on you and your family. Stay safe and take care. Goodbye.